My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we're going to be talking about Juneteenth celebration. And this celebration took place June 15th at Bowen Park in Waukegan, Illinois, and it was hosted by Mrs. Sylvia England. And we thought this evening we would have another resource person, Pastor Dr. Anthony Connolly, from the pastor of the Antioch Baptist Church, 517 Helmholtz, Waukegan, Illinois. Good evening, Dr. Connolly.
Good evening to you, Dr. Brooks.
Okay, we'd like for you to tell our listening audience a little bit about the history of Juneteenth celebration.
Oh, okay, Dr. Brooks. First of all, when we think about Juneteenth, that we have discovered in our research that there's more than one Independence Day celebration in the United States. And so on June 19th of 1865, that was when General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas with about 1,200 soldiers to announce that the slaves had been freed. But there's an awful lot of things that preceded that. For example, when the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln at the time, had presented his preliminary proclamation to his cabinet, and that was in July of 1862, but then he decided to wait for a military victory in order to announce this Emancipation Proclamation. And as a matter of fact, in September of 22nd of 1862, following the Battle of Antietam, which the Union was victorious in that battle, then he formally made his announcement when he alerted the Confederacy of his intention to free all of the slaves within the rebellious states. And so 100 years later, with the Confederacy was still in full rebellion, he went ahead and issued his final Emancipation Proclamation at that time. So, that was I thought very significant. In that, while there was concern about humanity, but there was also some politics involved as well. In President Lincoln's effort to preserve the Union. But there's some things that I thought that were pretty significant that I could bring to your program that we could probably just kind of share. That first of all, that the slaves in June the 19th, we're talking about Juneteenth Day. Okay. And that was the day in June the 19th of 1863, but in June the 19th announcement came more than 2.5 years after Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which was on January the 1st of 1863. I want to make sure I get all my numbers right because you'll get some letters.
Well, why did it take so long?
Well, I think, as I said, that word spread kind of slow. Now, we are talking about slavery. We're talking about economics. We're talking about the slave owners, the slave holders. They were dependent upon the labor, this free labor of these slaves for to make their money, their economy. Okay. So and as I was going to point out a little later on, that they, even after the Emancipation Proclamation was announced, they still were reluctant to share this information with their slaves. So at the time that it was announced, a lot of them kept this information from their slaves, and so they were emancipated and didn't even know they were emancipated. At that time.
This is amazing to me, and I'm learning right along with my listening audience about this. So I really appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to come down and share this important information with us. But when the Constitution of the United States was legal there, slaves were 3/5 of a person. So they weren't free then. How, I guess it was political purposes, really, the reason they had 3/5. How can you get 3/5 of a person? I don't know. So slaves were not free by the Constitution of the United
Right.
States. So what are you saying? It wasn't until Abraham Lincoln issued the executive order, the
Yeah.
Emancipation Proclamation,
Right.
January 1, 1863, that made the slaves free. But
Yeah.
then they weren't free then. It
Right.
took, you mentioned about 100 days later?
Yeah, it took about 100 days later for the information to get. For example, 100 days after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln,
Okay.
It was about that time that General Granger and about 1,200 Union troops went down to Galveston, Texas, because Texas was the state that was like the holdout state. You know, they were the last ones to emancipate their slaves. You know? So, and a lot of the other Confederate states, the slave owners in the other states, they all kind of migrated down to Texas with their slaves, right? Because you know, so it's kind of like the last stand, if you will. You know, so that so from what I found out was that there were from the Union perspective, it was like over 250,000 slaves in the state of Texas by itself. They were already free, but none of them were aware of it because nobody rushed to share that information with them. You know, so there's a lot of stuff was going on to keep this information from them. And so there's a lot of theories, Dr. Brooks, about why the law wasn't enforced in Texas, right? Because you remember, Texas itself, before it became a state, was a republic. Right. And so so after Lee surrendered at Appomattox, you know, and the Civil War ended at April 9th of 1865, if I remember. And so, and the news traveled really slow back in those days, you know, so it took Confederate soldiers in western Texas more than 2 months to even hear that Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox. So still, some have struggled to explain, they had trouble explaining this 30-month gap, you know, between the proclamation and the freedom, leading to some to suspect that the Texas slave owners, they purposely suppressed this information. You know, as I say, you know, because Texas was the last bastion of slavery, you know, within, you know, the United States after the war had ended.
So purposely done. It wasn't because they didn't have Facebook or email or whatever.
Yeah, there was none of that. They couldn't pick up the phone. Now, you know, they had telegraphs. You know, however, you know, who can speculate, you know, the lines were down or, you know, as a result of combat, the war and whatnot, you know, so, but there's, as I say, there's a lot of theories, a lot of speculation as to what really was going on that kept this information, you know, from the slaves, the people that were the subject of this Emancipation Proclamation. Right? So, and there's a lot of other theories that, one particular theory that stood out, you know, in my research was that, that the original messenger that was sent with the word, you know, of the Emancipation Proclamation, he was murdered, you know, on the way down there to Texas to keep this information purposely from getting, you know, spread around through Texas.
That was the fact, right?
Yeah. You know, so, and that's a theory, though. That's not a fact. That's a theory. That's right. It's just a theory, as I say. You know, but you know, the real reason probably was Lincoln's proclamation simply wasn't enforceable in the rebel states, even you know, before the war was over, and even after that. You know, because you had people that were slave owners who were adamant that no, this is my property, and you're not going to tell me what to do with my property. Right. So yeah, so, and that's interesting to think that, you know, my great grandmother was considered property. You know, so that's right. Old Grandma Connolly, great Grandma Connolly. That's right. You know, so and her mother was a slave.
What state was? What state was that? Your great?
My great grandma was from Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So, you know, so yeah, so we.
Well, I'm a native Mississippian too.
Oh well, yeah.
I was born in Lexington, Mississippi, and I don't know.
Right. She come from around the Jackson area.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. There you go. So that's why I tell people that you know, I may not sound like it, but you know, with my grandmother, not my great grandmother, so it's passed down. Right. You know that yeah, I know about the South. You know, it
Okay.
was instilled in me from grandma. There you go.
Okay.
But anyway, so the fact that it was probably unenforceable was because of the resistance, you know, of the slave owners themselves at the time. Yeah, so there's, you know, and there's a lot of other things that we could talk about, you know, in reference to that. For example, you know, I thought it was interesting. Now, as I say, for example, in Texas, there were over 250,000 slaves, okay, that they could count, right?
Okay.
You know, but when General Granger got there, he read what is documented, which is factually documented as General Order Number 3.
Okay.
You know, and in that order, if I could quote what he said, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Right, so this executive order probably went everywhere, right? And so this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. So now here's the thing right here, that the freed men were advised to remain quietly at their present homes, and now instead of being slaves, they were considered, he wanted them, the order said, to be considered as hired hands, right? You know, so they were informed that they would not be allowed to collect or congregate around the military post, and that they would not be supported in idleness either there or anywhere else. And so in other words, they had to be busy. They just couldn't sit around.
Okay.
All right. So I thought that was quite interesting. So what followed then was what is known as the scatter, right? You know, and we know the word scatter means, hey, you know, let's split, man.
Okay.
You know, so
Okay.
but the scatter. So obviously most of the slaves were not really interested in staying, you know, on the plantation with their former masters, you know, the ones that beat them and deprived them and did this and did that to them, you know, subjugated them very viciously, you know, so they just took off, right? And so, in fact, some were leaving before he even finished reading the general order, right? They were already packed up and ready to go, right? And so what followed was called a scatter, as I pointed out. And when droves of former slaves left the state to finally to go north to find their family members that had already escaped through the underground and to find a better life, so to speak. You know, so yeah, so they didn't want to stay. And an interesting thought there is that, you know, when you see pictures or photographs of former slaves who now seem to be dressed up in the clothes of the day or the attire of the day, and some point out that because it was against the law to dress a slave. Yeah, that's why we saw them in such tattered clothes, right? So it's against the law. So what they did was, when they heard this General Order Number 3, a lot of them stripping off their clothes and throwing them in the creek, and they were putting on clothes that they had stole from their former masters. You know, that's why you see pictures of them, early pictures of them with, you know, the stovepipe hats and women wearing the, you know, big flowing dresses and whatnot. They stole these things from their masters as they got ready to make their way north, you know, to get off to those plantations. Yeah. So there was a river down in Texas called the Sabina River, and that when they left, the slave masters would send their hired hands to go after them, and it was documented that they would be shot and getting caught trying to swim across this river, you know, in an effort to get away. So even though there was an Emancipation Proclamation, there was an executive order freeing the slaves, you know, it just didn't happen just like that, you know, because primarily it was because of the resistance of the slave owners. So yeah, so there's an awful lot that we can look into that. So you know, the challenge is that, for example, that I'll give you another one in Texas, because it was such a large state, Dr. Brooks, that and General Granger's order, he didn't have enough troops to actually enforce it. Now we know how big Texas is, right, comparatively speaking. And so the word was slow to spread, and according to a historian whose name was James Smallwood, many slavers deliberately suppressed the information until after the harvest, and some beyond that. So in July of 1867, there were 2 separate reports of slaves being freed, and one report of a Texas horse thief whose name was Alex Simpson, who was a slave owner, and the only reason that his slaves were freed, which was in 1868 now, was because he was a horse thief and he had got caught, and he was convicted of horse theft and was hung, and that way his slaves were set free. But prior to that, he wouldn't let them go.
Wow.
That's right. So quite a an interesting thing, and another thing, and I'll try to let you get in there, Doctor. I know this is your show, but this gets to be so exciting and so informative.
I want to say this. I'm learning right along with my guests. So this is your program, the information that you are promulgating, as they say in the Navy, promulgating. It's very, very exciting. And now, if anyone else want to get more information, they go. We got computers now.
Oh, we got computers now. There's the National Archives, where all this stuff is documented. There is a, what is it, Juneteenth.com. That's our website dedicated to the Juneteenth Day historical celebration. Then there's the National Archives, as I pointed out, the History Channel. So there's a lot of bases, bastions of information. But just like any other research, Dr. Brooks, you have to not just get stuck with one opinion. You have to research so you can get do your fact checks, as you say. Check the facts. Because I noticed that there was a couple of sites where they got their dates were different. But I was able to confirm some things through the National Archive, which also had the original copy of the Emancipation Proclamation that was handwritten by Abraham Lincoln, so on and so forth, because once again, they didn't have copy machines, so, they had people sitting along just like, making copies, so.
You mentioned about the Underground Railroad, and many of our listening audience are wondering, was it a railroad underground that they were traveling? But you want to enlighten us about the Underground Railroad?
Well, the Underground Railroad was not a railroad underground, but it was a series of stops along a route. To and it was led by Black Moses. Right? That's what they called her. I'm trying to think of the woman's name. I got these other names in my head. You can help me out, but they want to put on a $20 bill. Oh
boy.
We'll come to it before the show goes off, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I threw a little humor in here. 3 things get away from me when you get old as I am. 3 things get away.
Yeah.
The first thing that go is the memory. I don't remember the other two. But I do, and a lot of our listening audience know the person that you're talking about.
They know who I'm talking about, I'm sure, and I'm having that same problem right now. But it will come to me, I'm sure.
But they would travel. Let's see, during the night, and then they were housed at different locations during the day. Right.
There were different stops along the railroad, just what they call it, the railroad, I guess you could say, that were and not just black people, but white people as well, who would provide hiding places where they would give them food and water and whatnot, and then they could move on. Sojourner Truth. Thank you very much out there in the listening audience.
It was housed back there.
That's right, Sojourner Truth. That's right. So that was the Underground Railroad, and so, but there were stops in Lake Forest, and other areas, within our area.
Oh yeah, you mentioned our area.
Yeah.
I mentioned about in the Gurnee, the village of Gurnee.
Yeah.
The Mother Rudd Home.
Yeah.
Is one stop, and I took a group out there.
Yeah.
And we went down in the basement where the slaves were housed.
Yeah.
And it was an uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
But they had to be there during the day and the flight at night.
Yeah. So these folks are actually risking their lives
Yeah.
to help the runaway slaves.
Right.
You know. So yeah, and this went as far as up into Canada, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the in Canada they would
Yeah.
be free.
Yeah.
Canada was
Yeah.
a free area, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So the Underground Railroad, you know, as it is so named, but Sojourner Truth, you know, was one way of, you know, helping, you know, those who wanted to take a chance and get their freedom, and so.
This is fantastic.
Oh
fantastic.
yeah, it is, and so yeah, and you know, when we talked about this program, you know, I just the more I looked into it, the more excited I got.
Okay.
You know, because you know, and we try to review this information every year. You know,
Okay.
you know, as a preacher, you know, every year I'm trying to preach a Black History sermon in February, and
Okay.
you know, there's always, you know, something that we need to continue to review our history, our past, you know, so that we can pass it on to our children, and they can pass it on to their children, because I see us, you know, African Americans as a synonymous with the Israelites, you know, and they are referred to as a peculiar people.
Okay.
You know, they were in subjugation. They were, you know, for 400 years, and God sent an emancipator, you know, in the person of Moses, you know, who told Pharaoh to let my people go. And you know, African Americans, we were, you know, in slavery for some 400 odd years, and God sent us an emancipator in the guise of, you know, Martin Luther King.
Okay.
You know, and of course, you know, in the midst of all of that, we call Abraham Lincoln Father Abraham.
Okay,
you know,
right.
So that's right. You know, so yeah. So there's a lot of history. You know, a lot of things that we ought to know, but we don't know.
It's very important because Black people are labeled as being lazy and not want to work and this type of thing, you know. But if you look at this country, it was built on the backs of slaves. The White House itself was built by slaves.
That's right.
And now we end up with being occupied by by African Americans for 8 years.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So,
but
yeah.
I have a book, and I didn't bring them with me. I've been giving you several things.
Yeah.
1,001 Black inventions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that, everything that you could think of, the filament of we didn't have lights. Traffic lights, stop and go. And,
that's right.
And you could name
the gas mask.
A gas mask.
The ironing board, the iron.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you know, and a lot of
computers.
those. Yeah.
All that
well,
stuff.
you know, a lot of those things now, and of course, you know, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone.
Okay.
But he had a black man with him who invented the filaments that go into the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, but you never talk about him. You know, just like Admiral Byrd, you know, he wasn't the first one to make it to the North Pole. You know, it was, you know, his assistant, Henry, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the point is that a lot of the things, those 1,001 inventions, a lot of those things were invented to make Black people's lives more easier, you know, as they went about their seemingly subservient duties.
I was thinking of corporations like Abbott. Maybe if you work there and you invent something in the company, they would take credit for it. You right? You do the inventing, you invented, but they take credit for it. And so a lot of this is the way they and it's. So another thing too I want to mention.
Yes.
We mentioned about invention by hand.
Yeah.
But Ludwig van Beethoven was a Spanish, was he a Moor, considered as black. The greatest pianist of all times was a black man. You know.
Yeah.
The person that discovered Chicago was.
That's right.
Just happened to be.
Yeah.
A black man.
A black man, that's right.
Baptiste.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, Baptiste, that's right.
We can go on and on, you know. And so it's not that blacks are lazy and don't want to do things, but if you put a slave on a start on a 1 yard line, then you put a slave owner on a 50-yard line. Who's going to win the race?
Right.
The one who got the upper hand over the 50-yard line. So that's what it was. Blacks are always on the starting line and try. So we have, we go on and on. Serena Williams in tennis, Joe Louis in boxing, and every sport that you could name.
Sure.
LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Owens, Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens, that's right. He won gold medals during the Olympics in World War II. Yeah,
1936.
1936.
And Hitler turned his back at the presentation.
Yeah.
And, just couldn't see. So what is it about blacks? Is that the DNA or something about that people just don't want to recognize?
Well, I don't want to say it's the DNA. I really don't hold to that theory, if you will.
Okay.
I remember the sports gambler. I think his name was Jimmy Breslin. Who said that the reason why black athletes, can run faster than white athletes because they got bigger legs or something like that.
Okay.
And that was an outright racist.
Okay.
Jab right there. But I do feel this is that as African Americans, we've had to fight for equality ever since we got off the boat, in 1519, right? It's been a struggle, and that being in order to be considered equal, we had to do things twice as good as our competitors. There's always, we always had to go one step further.
And it's still like that.
Yeah. It's still like that. Yeah. The challenge is still there. I don't want to turn our show into a wine fest or anything like that. But the facts are the facts. Sure, we've made a lot of inroads, in terms of equal treatment. Our president, 8 years, Barack Obama, we've got generals in the military, we've got police chiefs, we've got, politicians, where there were never was politicians out of Mississippi and South Carolina and what places, so, the opportunities are there. But now I think in the 21st century, it's a lot of it has to do with the individual motivation, because, we're still going to have that little faction of people who want to treat anybody other than, Anglo-Saxon white as, as being less of a human being.
Well, the Tuskegee Airmen, for example, use them as an experiment, and this type of thing.
Yeah.
And the first, the Navy was the first, military installation that was integrated, and the first black officers in the Navy were tested. Right at Great Lakes.
Right here at Great Lakes.
What happened is that they made the highest score, and the testers, they didn't believe they made the score. They retested them. Then they got higher scores the second time. And now every Navy person, man or female, male or female, comes through Great Lakes, has to come through those barracks that were named after the Golden 13.
The Golden 13, that's right. There you go. That's right.
We can go on and on.
So we ought to be, as a people, I think that we ought to have a sense of pride because we came from dire circumstances, and here we are now that in the 21st century, 2019, the opportunities for growth and development, is not out of reach. So it's up to the individual. Do you want to, or and I know that there's people that are living in all kinds of situations. We've got crime is at an all-time high. You've got all kind of stuff going on. But I think that if we stand up unified and together, that we can make some strides. We can provide those opportunities for our children because I just don't see a whole lot happening unless we get rid of the drama, so to speak, and, so that we can, move forward as a people.
Can I take off just a second, and we want to come back to Juneteenth. Of course, it's related, though.
Yeah.
You mentioned about slavery still exists today, and we could think of our prison system And we could spend a whole program on the prison system.
That's right.
It's nothing but slavery, right?
Well, that's true. I mean, the prison system now, we've evolved into private investors who build prisons, and it's a big money business now. See, and the prisoners, they're working with it 50 cents a day or 60 cents a day or something like that.
As a matter of fact, I just may throw this in too.
Yeah.
You are hosting a TV show from your church, and as a matter of fact, it airs on the same night. As a matter of fact, what by 4:30?
4:30 on radio Comcast. That's right.
Comcast every Thursday night.
Every Thursday night at 4:30. And we also stream live every Sunday at 11 o'clock.
Oh.
Yeah, so we have inroads to go all over the world, the World Wide Web, and we've got sponsors and that try to help us, with our mission, which is to go to spread the word of God, and so it's really great. I'm really grateful for what God is doing for us, in that we don't have to just be in this local area; we can take it to the world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And as a matter of fact, you're doing what the scripture says. What's it, Matthew 28?
Mm-hmm. Go ye into all the world. That's right. And
so you cannot physically go, but you by your program, you're going all over the world.
Yeah, and I think that I'm in a position where a lot of preachers are that are utilizing the internet as a means to spread the word, that we have to be factual about what it is that we're saying and what thus saith the Lord, because folks don't bring Bibles to church much anymore. They bring their phones, and if I say something or if I quote something from the Bible, they can Google me right there on the spot, and so, I mean, I know the scripture says to try every spirit and to see if they are of God, boy, give me a chance to catch my breath in case I actually made a mistake, but, it's all right though. I'm good because, I can appreciate that, so, just don't get caught up with the internet church, because that's not going to work for you.
Why don't we give your person that trained you to pray? I was thinking of Pastor Clarence Clark.
Pastor Clarence Clark, yes, sir.
That was a dynamite person, and he's trained so many people. So many young ministers have come through, and I have to give him his spirit lives on.
That's right. His spirit lives on. There's a group of us that came up under him as our spiritual father, and somebody labeled us the Clark Boys.
Okay.
Which I thought was good, and that's a proud moniker to wear. Let's see, myself, Pastor Arthur Gass, Pastor Woods, Pastor Morgan, who's the new pastor over at Christian Valley, Pastor Roberson, and so and the list goes on. And interestingly enough, that those of us that stuck with Pastor Clark, we're all pastors now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And we mentioned before, he has a street named after him near the credit union.
Mm-hmm. It's off of Green Bay Road and Clark Avenue, right next to the credit union, the Navy Credit Union. That's right.
Fantastic. Juneteenth celebration is one of the main reasons that we're here, and I have to give a shout out to Mrs. Sylvia England, the chairman of the committee that put this together. Yeah. And like I repeat, it was on June 15th, from I guess 11 to 5.
Yes.
And they had vendors, they had children's corn activities, they even got the Waukegan's library to participate with them, demonstrations. They even have an African American museum out there, with the Underground Railroad Museum, and health and wellness, and how to bridge generation gap within our community, and how to increase voter registration. We can't forget that.
Yeah, we can't forget about voter registration. That's right.
And so they had the idea there. Oh boy, it's been going on since about 2009, I believe it is. Each year. Yeah. And it's a great celebration out there. And I can say that was at Bowen Park in Waukegan.
Yeah.
God's purpose for man on earth. I'm just, I always bring this up at each one of my programs. We're all from the same dust, right?
That's right.
Same dust.
From the dust you came, to dust you will return. That's right.
And that is a fact. If you, a person passes away, and if you don't get him in the ground pretty quick, he's going to turn right back to, right back to dust,
Sure.
So why can't, is the young man that was beat up in California and said, why can't we get along?
Oh, yeah.
With Rodney King.
Rodney King, yeah.
Why can't we
Can
get
we
along?
just get along? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
I think that is not going to happen.
But it's because of sin. Now, that sin is very powerful.
Sure.
When Adam ate off the fruit, good and evil, right?
That's right, the fruit of good and evil, that's right.
And that's not going to be corrected until Christ comes again.
Until Christ comes again, that's right. But until then, we're going to have to contend with sin, right? And, sin, let's say sin is a result of man's disobedience.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, right.
There you
That's
go.
what it is.
And so, and Satan is the author of sin, I guess you could say, because he was disobedient in heaven. And there was a war in heaven, and he was expelled along with his, angels and whatnot. But the point is that sin is prevalent, sin is real. We are at a stage now, I think, where sin is so strong in some folks that they just gave up, and now we see, we take bad is good and good is bad. Somebody just done reversed it. So, but if we as Christian Bible believers, we believe in God, that He is the creator of everything that we can see and we cannot see. We believe that He has a Son, whose name is Jesus, and who came down to this earth, and who died on the cross, who was buried and rose again on the third day, according to the Scriptures, which is in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, that He rose on the third day morning, and that the third person in this Godhead is the Holy Spirit, right? That indwells in us. If we believe these things, if we have faith, to believe these things, then we got a chance to make it. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to, get a gold star every day, but God has provided a means for us to clean up our act, through repentance, right? And while, God is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins as far as the east is from the west, God will forgive us, but man won't. Man will keep bringing it up.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what kind of past you had, but if anybody gets mad at you and they go, yeah, Dr. Brooks, I remember when, and points that.
But when you say tell your faults to your brothers, you're supposed to share your faults, but is that's the scripture, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, we should, John 13:34 and 35, in that scenario, Jesus' disciples were talking, and so, they were asking, like, what should they do? Because apparently there was some doubt as to who they were and what they were, were representing. And so Jesus told them, basically just to love ye one another, and love you one another as I have loved you, and by this they will know that ye are my disciples indeed. That's John 13:34 and 35 in a nutshell. So we have to learn how to love one another. We need to take the limitations off our love. We got limits on our love. We only love so much where God so loved. So we ought to be striving every day to try to get to that level, of love that God had for us. We need to try to learn how to so love each other that there ain't nothing we can do to one another that's going to stop us from caring about one another and taking care of one another.
How can a person just take a gun and just take the life of another?
That's a tough question, Dr. Brooks, because
if I don't love myself, how can I love
right, that's
my
right.
brother,
That's right. How can you say you love God but you don't love your brother, right?
Okay.
I think the next scripture after that, the verse after that says you're a lie.
Okay.
If I can put it in that context. But I'm like this, that I spent my time in the military. I'm sure you have too.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Korea. I was in Korea.
Yeah, Korea. There you go. And you know, I appreciate your service. I thank you for that time that you, because I know that that's one of those another examples. But the thing is, though, is that when you say how can one person take a gun, well, it don't necessarily have to be a gun. It can be a rock. You know, it could be a bow and arrow.
Young lady stabbed her mother to death.
Right.
Mother.
Yeah. Well, see, I mean, that sin is in the world. You know, that sin will make you do things that you know, sin will make you say things that you never thought you would say. You know, sin will make you do things, you know. So the Bible says that we must be aware that Satan, 1 Peter says this, that Satan walks around like a roaring lion seeking whom he can devour. We have to learn how not to feed that lion with our behavior, right? There you go. See, because, you know, we need to learn what's on the devil's menu. The devil come to kill, steal, and destroy. You just named an example. You know, this girl's life was destroyed because he killed her mama, right? You know, it's happening, you know, and it's been happening. But if we learn how to fight in the right way, you know, we're not fighting a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle. You know, so, you know, the Bible gives us ways to fight the devil. You know, when Jesus was out in the wilderness with the devil, you know, and he was, you know, 40 days out there, and he said, you know, if you would just bow down and worship me, turn that bread, turn a rock into bread, right? And Jesus' response was that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, right? You know, so we just have to learn the word, right? You know, and then, I mean, I'm getting older now, so I have to have some reference with me, but, you know, but there are other folks whose minds are as sharp as a tack, you know, so, but then you got to remember too that the Bible goes on to say that if you resist the devil, you remember I said don't feed him, right? Don't feed him. But if you resist the devil, he'll flee from you. So don't feed the devil, you know. So sometimes we got to get off our phones. Sometimes we got to turn the TV off, you know. Sometimes we just got to crack open that Bible, you know, and stay in it, you know, for at least once a day, you know, an hour a day, anything until it starts, right? And then once you start to learn these things and internalize these things, right? You know, then, you know, you'll begin to see some positive results. That's right.
You know, we speak of prejudice, but and it's as far as I can analyze, it's based on the color of the skin.
Well, I mean, heck, look at me. I mean, you know, you know, and what was I? You know, while I was waiting for you, I was just thumbing through my phone here, Comcast, you know, and there was a, I didn't even read the article, I just saw the headline where, you know, some movie star discovered that her mama was passing for white. She was a mulatto woman, but she passed for white her whole life. You know, so, I mean, you know, I don't look like the atypical, you know, African American, you know, but you know, my roots go all the way back to Mississippi, like I'm saying, you know, so you know, and you know, and our family, you know, lived all over the Midwest, you know, so.
So racism is real. There's no doubt about it.
Racism is real. You know, it's. I tell you, you know, when you say it like that, now, see, Dr. Brooks, I worked in social services for 35 years, right? And I'm one who I will talk to anybody. I don't care. You know, you know, I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. You know, if I say hello and you say, you know, your response is not conducive to continued discussion, you know, have a nice day. You know, God bless you. You know, see you later. You know, but because I'm not dark, right? Look at Adam Clayton Powell. Adam Clayton Powell, you know, state representative from New York, right? Look at him. You know, hair straight and nice. You know, light skin, you know, you would never thought he was a black man until he started talking, right? There you go. You know, so, you know, but same here because I'm safe, you know, I'm approachable, you know, and I'm not one to push anybody away, you know, so, you know, but so it's just interesting, you know, when you say color of the skin, you know, I mean, that's a whole nother subject right there when you talk about pigmentation, right? That's right. You know, when you talk about Jesus, you know, every picture you have, I even have one over at the church, and I found out, you know, when I researched it, that everybody's got the same picture, but the artist used the face of a soldier who was in the British Army, you know, and he painted Jesus with long brown hair and blue eyes and, you know, and everything like that, but the Bible says that he has hair like wool and, like lamb's
Now,
wool. And
we read the
all that good
same,
stuff.
there's only one Holy Bible, but like you say, the description of Jesus is there, but why would they paint him blonde hair and blue eyes, and the Bibles tell you?
And I think that's because, well, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but I could just kind of theorize.
Okay.
I could theorize because we know the region, where Jesus, had his ministry, everybody was kind of dark skinned, and because you're out in the sunlight all the time, you ain't got no shade, and things like that. But the fact that in America, we're talking about Juneteenth, we're talking about slavery, right?
Okay.
That during the course of that slavery, that they, as long as they kept the word or education from the slaves, they had them,
okay.
And so I remember that the slave masters would make them go to church, and the slave master would be the preacher, right? And would read the Bible to them. Right.
Okay.
And their description of Jesus, because their ideology that they were trying to pass on to the slaves was that of, white folks, right? There you go, and that you are subservient or subjected to the will of the white folks, so to speak. Back then, but then we know that the slave masters' children started hanging around with, with the slaves' children, and they started teaching the slaves how to read, right? And they would take that information. Next thing you know, folks were reading the Bible, and what did they learn? They found out the truth in the Bible, right? They never been to seminary or been to college, but the word, made itself plain, So
we have to. We're taught to love one another, and it's got to be love that we have for all people, right?
That's right.
Because the establishment passed a law against not only slaves learn how to read and write, but for those that teaching them.
Well, yeah.
They called teaching them to read and write were
That's
in
right.
trouble.
Sure, they would get in trouble as well, So that's kind of like, contributing to rebellion, so to speak, There you go. See, because remember that slavery was all about economics. Right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So when Cyrus McCormick, invented the cotton gin and all that, that cut down on their money, didn't it?
Okay.
So the challenge there was, that once you get educated, once you start to learn, then you no longer enslaved, you free your mind, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is so important that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, as back in 1926, he stopped his profession and concentrating on Black history.
Yes.
Now that was show you how
That's
important
right.
important it was.
That's right.
And Black History Month was extended by 1976, 50 years later, by President Ronald Reagan. It was so much. It is not taught in our schools, and all other histories are taught, but not Black history.
It's unfortunate we only get 28 days to review 400 years of history, right? Over 400 years of history. So.
And now our schools here locally don't even have it in the schools at all.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we need to have that in there so they can see. I mean, the United States is made up of all races, creeds, and colors.
Okay, very diverse, very diverse.
Yeah. Right. And so, so we need to know about our neighbors. You know, it's all about respect. Okay. I live in a neighborhood. Been living in the same house for almost 40 years, and I've seen the neighborhood change. From when I first moved over there, it was like Polish, folks there, and they died off. I got one Polish neighbor left, and he's pretty old. But then the blacks that were there, they moved in, then they moved out, and now it's pretty much Hispanic. So I got respect for all, cultures.
Here's the thing I like to, since you mentioned that, the area that I moved into in North Chicago, the block was all white. We were the only first black to move in the block. But the way we got in there is our real estate person fronted for us. He did all the work, leg work,
Yeah.
to get us, and otherwise we couldn't.
Yeah.
We couldn't get
Yeah,
it.
that's interesting. Yeah.
And I couldn't understand that. I couldn't. We went to the Small Business Administration. I mentioned this many times because if you can't get local loans, it's small SBA is the one that will assist you in getting funds, right?
Sure.
So our banks would not give us a loan. So even though we qualified for it, we are both working and everything. You know.
Sure.
And we went to SBA and got the papers, and they told us that one of the requirements is that you need 3 letters of denial.
Of denial, yeah.
From your bank. And then we'll give you a loan, because we're not competing against the banks.
Yeah.
So we said, oh, no problem. So we got 3 letters just like that, you know.
Yeah.
And we went down and turned our paperwork in, and because we knew what the requirements were.
Yeah.
We're both college graduates.
Sure.
You know, we know how to fill out papers, this type of thing. And we took them to the secretary, and she said, you know, fill them out, you know, and she could bring them back, and you'll see a counselor and loan officer and this type of thing. And so we say, well, we're going up to Dirksen Building was and say, fill the papers out and bring them back. And we came back, and we say, we want to see a loan officer now, you know. So she was surprised. So she let us see a loan officer, and you know, we got tentative approval the same day.
Just like that.
Just like that, yeah.
I tell you.
So don't teach people to read.
Yeah.
You know, that's all. You know, it's they may surprise you. You know. Okay, what we're gonna do is end up now. We've covered Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And that's connected with racism, and we've covered it, and hopefully we have enlightened people to turn their lives around and go to the computer. And we have one thing I like to mention here. We don't have time. There's a whole story about this, but this is the reparations that Congress is considering now. John Conyers from Michigan brought this up for many years.
Yeah.
You know, HR 40. And this is not to see whether, this is just a study. He wants them to pass a law, go through committee, won't get through committee, for study reparations to see what's involved with it. And they will not even pass legislation to study a reparation, because this is, they can't, I don't know.
I think that to study it would be an admission of our slavery history, you know, and the history as a whole, because you know, while the slavery in America of the African Americans is prevalent, the American Indians were subjugated.
Okay.
You know, and so there's a lot of things that probably haven't been brought to the forefront. You know, so you know, the government is in denial. Let me put it that way.
Okay. Right.
So yeah, I hear you.
Right. So I want to thank you very much to enlighten our listening audience about Juneteenth and the many other topics that we have covered, and hopefully that it will educate people. We probably shocked to find out that the slave owner was not the only one that went to the shack. Mama went to the shack too.
Yeah, that's right.
So his wife went to the shack.
That's right.
So and that's when we have people of different
yeah,
colors.
that was another stat, that the 40%, or I should say the majority of slave owners were female.
Okay.
Yeah, white slave owners were females, the majority percentage.
Fantastic.
Yeah, see, we could go a little further.
Okay.
You know, and see, but we only got a couple of minutes left. But we did a lot of hopping around, you know, because there's so much. You know, our history is so vast that you know, we could dedicate 2-3 shows to just looking into the historical perspective of the African American, you know, people in the United States.
And we just want to emphasize that when where we started from, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln, January 1, 1863. But it took
2 more years.
Over
100 days. Right?
100 days.
Yeah,
for the word to get to Galveston.
That's right, and it still didn't get around as they would like it because the slave owners were interfering with the spreading of the news.
Okay. Now, are we free today? Matter of opinion. Right?
Matter of opinion.
Because I brought up our youth filling our prison system. They're deliberately sent there because they don't have the money for good attorneys.
Sure.
And they take this plea bargaining and say, well, you have 5 years instead of 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so our prisons are filled, and we mentioned that it's an economic thing,
That's right, and it kind of reminds me of hell. That hell would never run out of room; it keeps expanding itself, right?
Okay.
And our prison system would never run out of room. They just build more prisons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we say the Constitution right now, if you read it, 3/5 of a person, African Americans are, but it was amended. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment.
13th Amendment, that's right.
Negroes made citizens in the 14th Amendment, and Negroes made voters the 15th Amendment. Now, Negroes were made voters, but now every effort has been made to suppress the Voter
Rights Act.
Right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
he's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And here they suppressing it,
But I don't think that'll ever be rescinded, though, because, if they rescind the Voter Right Act, that means that, only a certain faction, I think, will be in power.
Okay.
And we are founded on the right to, the pursuit of happiness and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody has to have an equal say, in how the country runs.
Wouldn't this be a great country if we had diversity? We got diversity.
Oh, this country is so diverse right now. It's just really, I think that's where a lot of the confusion is. We're just too diverse. We done got away from the premises on which this country was founded. In God we trust. Right?
Okay.
We done. Oh man, it's kind of like living in Sodom and Gomorrah almost. I'll tell you, good gravy.
Well, tell us, like the Jews, what the Jews say, never again, right?
Never again, that's what they say.
And every effort has been made
to
see that nothing happens like what Hitler did to the Jews.
That's right. 6 million Jews were murdered. Yeah, never again.
But what about the 100 million slaves that were thrown overboard that never made it from Africa to
the United States? That's right. Never again.
We never talk about that.
Well, that's why we sang those songs. Before I be a slave, I'll be resting in my grave.
And that's what they did. They would jump overboard and ship. Right. When they
that's right. That's right. They would go overboard rather than be a slave.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, we've enjoyed bringing this program to you about Juneteenth celebration, and our host has been Pastor Dr. Anthony Connolly, pastor of the Antioch Baptist Church, 517 Helmholtz of Waukegan, Illinois. Thank you very much, Pastor Connolly.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Promulgating this information to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.